Do you think being exceptional is enough when the world only sees where you come from? She organized every executive's life down to the second. She translated 4 clients from 5 countries. She brought calm to chaos, precision to disorder, and yet they only saw her as the assistant. Until one night, one red dress and a room full of powerful people. She shattered every assumption ever made about her. And then, everything changed. A corporate gala designed to humiliate her. A viral video that flipped the hierarchy overnight. A CEO torn between loyalty to his partners and his awakening conscience. And a woman who never wanted revenge. Only respect tonight. You'll meet Isabela Luna, and you'll witness how quiet strength rewrote the rules of power, class, and dignity in a city that only respects winners. But do they still respect you when you refuse to play their game? Isabela never asked to be seen. She just wanted to do her job, pay her rent, and keep her head down. But in a world that confuses status with worth, being invisible doesn't protect. It erases you. She had spent years building a resume that could rival any partner in the firm. She had spoken at conferences, led community programs, and taught illiterate families how to read legal documents in 5 languages. But none of that mattered, because the moment she walked into Soto and Associates as an assistant, every door of Smile was politely locked. And the cruelest part, she got used to it, until the day she was invited to the company gala, not to be celebrated, but to be made into a joke. But what they didn't realize was that Isabela Luna doesn't break quietly. What would you have done in her place? Would you have shown up knowing they were waiting to laugh? Would you have stayed silent or made them listen? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe quiet people carry the loudest storms? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that make us rethink what power really looks like. Isabela Luna was a whisper in the corridors of Soto and Associates, name on the door. A silhouette behind the mahogany desk. A voice no one truly heard. Day after day, she arrived before dawn, her heels clicking softly on polished marble, and stayed long after the partners had drained the bar cart. Her world was one of meticulous order. She coordinated schedules down to the minute. She managed crisis before they surfaced. She translated dense legal briefs from French, Arabic, and Spanish into flawless English. She held countenance in her hands, but remained tethered to the role of the assistant. Inside, a familiar ache pulsed. Each time she offered insight in a meeting, an idea distilled from her overseas work. Teaching refugees to read eyes flicked past her as if she were invisible. Every compliment she earned was filtered through condescension. Good job organizing my calendar, they'd say, as though excellence could be contained by an Outlook invitation. Yet the truth she carried in her chest was undeniable. She was the firm's secret strength, the engine that ran its high-stakes machine by mid-morning. Her office was coated in the scent of her coffee, her only comfort. She'd lean back in that swivel chair, close her eyes, and let memories of Paris flood her mind. She'd been a coordinator for Books Without Borders, orchestrating a literacy program that transformed entire neighborhoods of immigrant families. She remembered holding the trembling hand of a Senegalese professor who had lost everything until she helped him teach his first class of displaced students. Watching him reclaim his dignity one word at a time. That man's grateful. Smile still warmed her when the corporate world turned cold. But at Soto and Associates, dignity was a currency she could never spend. There was Camila Vargas, the partner's daughter, who regarded Isabela with a perfunctory nod each morning. "Good morning, assistant," her tone sharpened by hidden mockery. There was Ramiro Mendoza, the senior partner, whose curt coffees here carried all the force of a prison guard locking a cell. Even Javier Soto, the CEO who privately admired her competence, dismissed her with a clipped "See that it's on my desk by 5. As if her humanity slipped through his fingers whenever she walked into a room. Each dismissal was a silent betrayal, a wound reopened. And still she stayed. Because to leave meant admitting that her qualifications, her years of study, her real-world impact were worthless in the face of an inherited privilege she could never buy. She swallowed the sting of humiliation like bitter wine, hoping, somehow, to prove herself by endurance. One afternoon, she found a meeting request from Javier. "Quick chat, my office." Her heart throbbed. Did he finally see her? She rehearsed. Speeches, polished ideas and lyrics of self-worth in her head as she climbed the stairs. But when the door closed behind her, it wasn't recognition that filled the room, but a dry apology. "Isabela, I've noticed your work. Impressive, but we need you here to support the senior partners. They're uncomfortable with too much independence on your part." He spoke with hesitant sincerity, but the words cut deeper than any outright insult. His good intentions only underscored her reality. She was a placeholder, not a professional. Betrayed by the very person she thought might champion her, she left his office grasping at the edge of her composure. In the hallway mirror, her eyes flickered with anger she couldn't release, angry at him, angry at herself, angry at a world that refused to see her talent as anything but servitude. That night, back in her tiny studio apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed, nursing bruised pride. The city lights blinked through the window, indifferent, endless. She wondered if her invisibility was a choice she'd unconsciously made, to stay small so no one could hurt her more. Yet every fiber of her being rebelled against that. Surrender. Something had to change. And as the company's annual gala invitation, signed in ornate script, rested on her desk, she realized the invitation was not an honor, but a gauntlet thrown. In contempt, a test to see if the assistant would show up to be the evening's entertainment. But Isabela Luna had never been one to remain silent. The envelope arrived on a grey Tuesday afternoon, its cream paper heavy with formality. Isabela found it slipped under her office door, an invitation to the company's annual gala at the Grand Regency Hotel. The same gala she knew was legendary for its wealth of caviar, celebrity guests, and whispered power deals made behind chandeliers. She stared at her name printed in flowing cursive. Ms. Isabela Luna, honored guest. Her pulse thundered. The word honored felt like iron in her mouth. Could they truly mean to honor the assistant? Or was this a cruel jester, gilded noose, meant to parade her before the partners like a prize pony, only to remind her of her place? That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, the invitation between her folded hands. Across from her, Sophia, her younger sister and fiercest protector, watched with quiet concern. The single bare bulb above them cast long shadows. "Camila Vargas," Isabela whispered, eyes dark. "She designed this. She and Ramiro. They think I'll be the evening's entertainment." Sophia's lips pressed into a vow. What do they plan to do? Isabela closed her eyes, remembering every slight. The smirk when Camila spoke of important employees, only to correct herself with a venomous smile. Only those who matter. The memory made her stomach knot. They want to watch me squirm. Sophia reached across, her hand warm. Then don't give them the show they expect. But the fear curling in Isabela's chest refused to be so easily banished. She thought of every moment she had swallowed her pride, the sting of every dismissive glance. A voice inside whispered, "Stay home, fake sick, disappear." Yet another voice, firmer countered, "Show up, demand to be seen." Late that night, Isabela lay in bed, her mind a storm. She recalled the day she first arrived at Soto and Associates, brimming with hope and freshly minted credentials from a top European university. She remembered the pride that lit her chest when she aced her first big project, organizing a cross-border webcast for an international client, and she recalled how quickly that pride was eclipsed by condescension. "Nice work, assistant," as if excellence were unexpected, as if her talent were incidental. Worse still was the conversation with Javier 2 weeks ago, when he commended her achievements but insisted she remain support for the partners. He meant well, she knew, but his words were betrayal-dressed as praise. Every kind phrase became a chain, binding her to a role she never sought. Now, with the invitation resting on her dresser, she felt those chains tighten. She slid from her sheets and crossed to the mirror. The reflection that stared back at her was pale but resolute. In that quiet moment, she made a choice. The next morning, she arrived early, ticket in hand, dressed in simple black slacks and a crisp white blouse, and armor of professionalism she had honed over years. Javier caught sight of her the moment he stepped into the reception area. "Isabela," he said, surprise flickering across his face. "I thought," she held up the invitation. "Your office said I was invited." He hesitated, his mouth opened, closed, and then he simply nodded. He handed her a silk envelope containing a black tie for him and a quartile-coded seat assignment for her. Their fingers brushed, and she felt the tremor of his apology unspoken between them that night. Beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Regency, Isabela surveyed the crowd, partners in tailored tuxedos, clients swaying to the string quartet, socialites laughing with champagne flutes. Camera flashes glinted like distant stars. Somewhere near the head table, Camila and Ramiro lounged on gilded chairs, their eyes fixed on her dot. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped onto the grand staircase. She straightened her back, inhaled, and ascended. Each step was a defiance, a refusal to be invisible. By the time she reached the main hall, murmurs rippled through the assembled elite. Who is that woman? Their curiosity was her weapon. Spotlights found her, and she paused just long enough for the room to hush. Then she moved forward, confident and unhurried, her footsteps echoing against marble. She was no longer the assistant. She was the storm they never saw coming. A low chord from the quartet seemed to underscore the sudden shift in atmosphere, and as she approached the table where the senior partners sat, her crimson dresser, carefully chosen statement caught every eye, bold, unyielding, impossible to ignore. Silence fell for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Then, in that charged stillness, Isabela lifted her chin and met every gaze with equal measure. They had invited her to be humiliated. Instead, she claimed the stage. Isabela paused on the broad marble steps, her heart pounding like a war drum. Beneath the chandelier's glow, every eye turned to her as she descended, an apparition in scarlet silk. The red dress clung to her shoulders and waist, its simplicity carved by couture, yet its power was unmistakable. A bold proclamation in a room built on muted greys and pinstripes. Inside, her pulse raced. She recalled the early mornings spent, hemming that hemline herself after hours, stitching more than fabric. She was sewing together years of invisibility, frustration, and determination into a single, unbreakable statement. A hush rippled through the crowd as she reached the foot of the staircase. The head table sat before her, Camila Vargas poised in gold lame, Ramiro Mendoza's smug smirk, and Javier Soto, frozen with disbelief. Their laughter at her expense was meant to be merciless. Night was poised as her performance. Instead, the spectacle had transformed. She inhaled, steadying herself. Beneath the fabric, her body trembled with every memory of betrayal. The desk-bound snickers, the patronizing thanks that rang hollow in her ears, the sting of Javier's gentle rebuke when he signed her off as a support role. She had worn humility like a too-tight glove. Now she shed it. She took a single step toward the table, each footfall deliberate, unscripted. The murmur swelled. Who is she? Why is she here? With every question cast in their eyes, she claimed another inch of her rightful realm as she neared. Camila's porcelain mask cracked. The partner's daughter's lips parted, a gasp betraying her contempt. Ramiro leaned forward, eyes narrowed, calculating how to reclaim control of this unexpected script. But before either could speak, Isabela lifted her chin, voice calm but resonant. "Good evening," she announced, her voice clear over the clink of crystal. "Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to express my gratitude for allowing me to witness what true leadership looks like." A tremor of indignation shot through the room. "Ms. Luna," Ramiro barked, "we invited you as an employee, not a speaker." She smiled, eyes steady. "Precisely. As an employee, I have watched every speech, every negotiation, every handshake that signed multi-million-dollar deals, and I have learned that true leadership doesn't come from a title, it comes from seeing people for their capabilities, not their roles." The impact was instantaneous. A ripple of astonishment raced through the attendees. Javier's lips parted, caught between pride and guilt. Camila's cheeks flushed, rage mingling with fear. For the first time in her life, at Soto and Associates, Isabela controlled the room's energy. She let the silence stretch, savoring the moment of power reclaimed. Then she spoke again, softer this time. "I've spent years coordinating crises, translating between cultures, and helping clients navigate complex legal landscapes. Yet my voice has been muted by assumptions. Tonight, I stand here not for myself, but for every talented individual whose potential is eclipsed by prejudice. More than a dress, this was her armor. More than a speech, this was her reckoning." She felt tears of liberation sting her eyes on with them, a surge of resolve. The humiliation they plotted had backfired, forging her into something they could no longer overlook. As she stepped back, head held high, the room shifted. Guests whispered in newfound respect. Some rose to applaud an unspoken uprising against the elitism that had governed their world a moment ago. Even Camila's laughter dried on her lips, replaced by a haunted tension as she watched Isabela retreat, each graceful step echoing with promise. At the fringe of the crowd, Javier exhaled, his shoulders sagging. He had witnessed a woman transform scorn into strength, and he recognized his own complicity in her erasure. In that flash of insight, he felt the ground beneath his carefully constructed world tremble. Isabela paused by a pillar, her breath ragged. She placed a trembling hand over her heart, feeling its fierce rhythm. The betrayal of the past had been painful, but this moment, crystallized in red, was her emergence. She had stepped into visibility on her own terms. Behind her, the orchestra resumed, its melody tentative as it gathered momentum. The gala carried on, but everything had changed. Her red dress remained a beacon amid the swirl of ganza vivid. Reminder that invisibility is a choice forced upon you, but empowerment is a choice you claim. As she moved toward the exit, she cast a glance over her shoulder. Camila sat frozen, Ramiro's jaw clenched, and Javier rose, as though drawn by an invisible tether. He watched her go, eyes searching, a silent plea for understanding flickering in his gaze. She would not look back. Not yet. The morning after the gala, the firm's polished facade shattered. Javier Soto arrived at Soto and Associates feeling as though he were walking through a dream X. The dream was aflame. His reflection in the elevator doors revealed hollow eyes framed by dark circles. Overnight, social media had erupted. Clips of Isabella's speech trended under hashtags like #respect, her voice and #assistant no more. Journalists called, clients texted in concern. The world he had built on legacy and decorum trembled in the marble. Lobby Karina, his executive assistant, handed him a tablet. On screen, an online article bore the headline, "CEO's assistant steals the show and leaves her boss in the shadows." The subheading read, "Isabela Luna's red dress statement ignites reckoning at top law firm." He scrolled through a flood of comments. They need to rethink their values. Finally, someone called them out. "I'd hire her in a heartbeat." A sharp sting of pride cut through his panic pride and deep remorse. Before he could process further, Ramiro Mendoza stormed toward him, unreadable fury in his stride. Behind him trailed Diego Herrera and Camila Vargas, her composure frayed, mascara smudged. "Were you planning this?" Ramiro barked, voice low. "Let a junior associate humiliate us on national television." Javier's throat tightened. He wanted to answer that he didn't plan anything, that he was as stunned as they were, but to admit that was to confess his own guilt. Instead, he swallowed and said, "She spoke her truth. I can't unhear it." Diego's lip curled. "Your truth. This is a mass PR disaster. We've got investors calling. Is this the culture you stand for? We've lost half our client list before breakfast." Camila's voice sliced in, "And you let her take center stage. Now we're paying the price. I hope you have a plan, Javier." He exhaled slowly. Their eyes bore into him, expecting leadership. But inside, he waged war between loyalty to his partners and the conviction that their foundation was rotten. The partners were his allies, even friends. Yet he could no longer stand by as they punished the one person who had shown courage. In the boardroom, they convened an emergency meeting. A thick silence hung as they sat around the polished table, flanked by silent legal counsel. Ramiro opened with a demand to terminate Isabella's employment effective immediately, urging that her removal might calm the storm. Diego pressed for a fabricated performance review, a few convenient errors to justify the dismissal, without legal blowback. Camila, trembling with both rage and despair, nodded vehemently. When the floor turned to Javier, his voice was quieter than expected, but steel ran beneath the softness. "Firing her will only confirm what the world already sees, that we value power over people, that we fear talent we don't control." He paused, gaze fixed on the mahogany surface, tasting their disbelief. "I don't want that to define us." Gasps circled the room. Ramiro's face went ashen. "You can't be serious. This firm will collapse if we don't contain the damage." Javier closed his eyes, recalling every injury Isabela endured. Hear the whispered slights, the belittling tone of every "thank you, assistant." Betrayal wasn't only a gala trick. It was woven into daily life. He had watched it happen and said nothing. But silence was complicity. When he spoke again, it was to announce a different path. I'm issuing a public apology, not just to Isabela. He glanced at the empty seat where she should have been, but to every voice we've silenced. We'll stand up for those we've dismissed. That starts today. The room fell deadly silent. No one moved. Javier felt the weight of their scrutiny turn inward doubt, anger, disbelief. But beneath that, he sensed a flicker of respect. He left the boardroom without waiting for their response. Outside, the city's skyline against the dawn felt simultaneously punishing and liberating. He pulled out his phone and began drafting the apology letter. A confession of arrogance, an admission of failure, a vow to rebuild with integrity. Words poured out, each one tempered by the sting of guilt and the promise of redemption. He sent it to the city's leading newspaper and the firm's PR director simultaneously, and as the first rays of sun warmed his face, he braced himself to face the consequences, because sometimes collapse is the only path to true change. 2 days after his public apology, Javier Soto found himself in the firm's empty conference room long after dusk. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but he saw only the blank screen of his laptop and the echo of every insult Isabela had endured. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, drafting a new message, one far more personal than any press release or legal memo. He paused, recalling the look in her eyes when she'd descended those grand stairs in red silk. A mix of hurt, resolve, and something fiercer, hope. He realized then that the real collapse wasn't the firm's reputation. It was his own belief that he could remain complicit. He began typing, "Isabela, you challenged everything I thought I knew about leadership. I'm sorry I only saw you. As support, I want to build something different together. Will you meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m? No boardroom, just us." He sent it and stared at the screen, heart racing. The seconds stretched into minutes as he battled his own insecurity. What if she laughs? What if she never responds? What if this is just another performance for her? Meanwhile, in her small apartment, Isabela's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She found his message buried among dozens of notifications, some congratulatory, some accusatory. Her thumb trembled over the screen. She knew Javier's world. She had lived within its narrow margins. Could his apology be more than optics? Could he genuinely want her as an equal, not a token? For hours, she wrestled with the invitation. Images of betrayal surfaced: Javier's gentle rebuke in his office, the partner's laughter at her expense. Yet, beneath the hurt glimmered the memory of his hesitation at the gala, the subtle tremor in his apology. He saw me in that moment. Finally, she typed a reply. "I'll meet you. Café Marigian. Tres Policial Militar." The next afternoon, Javier arrived at the sunlit cafe 10 minutes early, clutching a thick dossier. His palms were slick with nerves. When the bell above the door chimed, he looked up to see Isabela step inside. No red dress this time, but a simple blouse and blazer that spoke of quiet confidence. She slid into the seat across from him. Neither spoke for a long moment. The hum of coffee machines and distant conversations filled the lull as Javier searched for words that felt honest, not rehearsed. At last, he cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, eyes guarded. "Why am I here, Javier?" He placed the dossier on the table. "This is a proposal for a community legal aid initiative. I want to launch free legal advice, literacy workshops, pro bono representation for people who can't afford top-tier counsel." He met her gaze. "Your experience with books, Without borders, your language skills, your empathy, can't imagine doing this without you. I need your vision and your leadership. She lifted the cover sheet, scanning the mission statement, the budget outline, the timeline. Inside, he had listed her name as co-director of community affairs, a title he knew she deserved 3 years ago. Her breath caught. This is generous. Her voice wavered, betraying a swirl of emotions: skepticism, pride, cautious hope. Why me? Why now? Javier's throat tightened. Because I finally understand that talent isn't a box to check, and compassion isn't marketing copy. You showed me that. I want this to be real, no cameras, no press releases, just us. Building something that matters. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She remembered the countless nights she'd stayed late to fix the firm's mistakes. The silent sacrifices she'd made, believing that work alone would earn respect. And now, here was an invitation not to serve, but to lead. She placed a hand on the dossier, her fingers brushing his. For a heartbeat, the noise of the cafe faded. She felt the weight of his sincerity, the fragility of his admission, and the courage it took to extend this offer. I need time, she said softly, but I want to believe you. He nodded, relief flooding his features. Take all the time you need, I'll be waiting. As she rose to leave, Javier realized this moment was more than a new project. It was the beginning of a partnership built on vulnerability and mutual respect. He watched her walk away, every step echoing with the promise of transformation. A year had passed since that afternoon at Calf Meridian, yet Isabela Luna's mornings still began with the gentle ritual of unlocking her office door only now. The sign above read Community Legal Partnerships. She inhaled the familiar scent of coffee brewing in the corner, then paused to admire the framed photos on the wall. Smiling families clutching diplomas. A group of immigrant elders holding their first tablets. Andrea's proud grin at her law school graduation. Each image was a testament to lives transformed. Behind her, Javier Soto stepped through the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one with a tentative smile. Good morning, co-director, he said, voice warm. She took the cup without looking up. Good morning, partner, she replied, an exchange neither of them took lightly. The shift in address carried the weight of every barrier they'd broken together as they settled at the conference table, now crowded with case files and community outreach plans. House donor Elena's pension appeal. Isabella's eyes lit, approved. She'll receive full benefits starting next month. Relief and pride softened her tone. And Luis got his back pay. Andrea's scholarship starts this fall. He exhaled, a sound of release. We're making real impact. Outside the window, the city pulsed with urgency, indifferent to the quiet revolution unfolding within these walls. Yet for Isabela and Javier, every success was a victory over the shadows of their pasts, over the years of dismissal, over the betrayal of silenced voices, over the fear that excellence without pedigree was invisible. Later that afternoon, they held a small gathering in the old reception area, repurposed into a community hub. Local residents filed in, greeted by volunteers offering refreshments. A young man approached Isabela shyly. Ms. Luna, he said, voice trembling, thank you for teaching me to read my own eviction notice. You saved my home. Her throat tightened. She offered him a gentle smile. You saved it yourself. I was just here to help. When the man nodded, tears glistening, Javier stepped forward to introduce himself. I'm Javier Soto, he said. Your courage inspired me to stand up for you." The man's gratitude echoed in the room, melding Javier's redemption with Isabela's leadership as the sun dipped low. Casting golden light through the windows, Isabela found a quiet corner. She traced her finger along the edge of the old reception disquants, the site of hurried coffee orders and hushed gossip. Now it was a place of empowerment and respect. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sophia, a photo of her own students celebrating their first diplomas. "You did it, big sister." A gentle warmth filled Isabela's chest. The pain of invisibility, the sting of betrayal, the struggle for recognition, all had led here to a space where talent and compassion thrived, where roles no longer dictated worth, and where every voice mattered. She looked up as Javier approached. He extended his hand, not in apology, but in partnership, ready for tomorrow's workshop. She accepted it, her grip firm. "Let's make sure they're heard." Together, they stepped into the hub's bright foyer, where names like client advocate and program coordinator adorned office doors. An assistant existed only in history. Their collaboration was not a fairy tale romance, but something rarer, a testament to resilience, to respect earned rather than demanded, to victory born from quiet determination. In that moment, Isabela realized true success isn't measured by headlines or titles, but by lives uplifted and voices finally heard. And as she and Javier greeted another group of hopeful faces, she knew their journey, though hard won, had only just begun. Thank you for joining Isabela and Javier's story. Share your thoughts. When have you found strength in quiet perseverance? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-world stories of empowerment.